Well, it's a snowy day in western New York. And in other news, elephants. Today I'm going to be sharing some stories about elephants, and I'd like to start with one that is my favorite elephant story, which is both mythical and entirely factual. At Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York, sometime in the mid-1970s, a classroom full of future priests, ministers, social workers, and well-wishers were having a discussion on the hot topic of feminism. And a young lady in the room said something like, "So what do we need men for anyway? Except for conception, women can handle everything ourselves." And a handsome young guy stood up and said, "Well, I've just returned from living in Kenya. And with the African elephant, the guys just show up once a year to fertilize the herd, then wander off, and the lady elephants handle everything without them. Is that what you have in mind?" And that young lady lifted her heavy stack of theology books and papers and launched them across the room at that guy who looked a bit like me. And she stormed out, and I think you can guess where this story is headed. That's how my parents met. My mom was that angry feminist's friend who stayed after class to gather her books and papers from the floor. And my dad stayed after also to help. And, their eyes met, and then my sister was born. And unlike the African elephant, my dad stayed around consistently while my siblings and I grew up. And my mom's friend, who threw her books that day, had a couple of kids with a guy who then wandered off like the African elephant, leaving her to handle everything herself as if men did not exist. The moral of that story, I think, is that we should not be afraid to discuss feminism in mixed company. That is why God made tables, so that we can duck and cover. But even if we have trouble staying dispassionate in the debate, or if someone mansplains the mating cycles of the African elephant, the story can still have a happy ending. My parents are living happily ever after in Baltimore and Albuquerque, as far apart as you can get without leaving the North American continent. And they're both really happy about it. This thing about elephants being matriarchal is true. Elephant herds tend to be female descendants, actually this is good, female descendants of a grandmother elephant, plus the offspring. So if you see an elephant herd coming, and you think it's the bull elephant leading the charge, actually that's the grandmother. And it's all her daughters and their children. Male elephants live alone or in small bachelor herds, and they only visit the family when they want something. I don't know if elephants are feminists. I assume the question never arises in their herds. But I've noticed that we humans tend to have a strong feeling of connection with the elephant. It's an animal that we instinctively think that we can learn something from, which is interesting. Because we as humans are really kind of snooty about who we think we can learn from among the animals. So here it is, the elephant, this creature that we seem to think has something to teach us, and yet when we raise elephants in captivity, we insist that they live in isolated Christian nuclear families. A bull and a, cow? Heifer? What do you call a female elephant? Eleanor, I think. I don't know. But I did ask before the service, is there anyone in the congregation named Eleanor? So just so you know, I'm looking out for you. I wouldn't want to hurt somebody. Anyway, when we raise elephants in captivity, we insist that they be very Christian about it. A male, a female, and their offspring. Perhaps this is the reason that elephants so rarely mate in captivity. Female elephants want to hang out with female elephants. They don't want to be self-conscious all the time. Elephants may or may not be a good example of feminism. Elephants also may or may not be a good example of realistic expectations about a male partner. But for our purposes here today, let's remember that for most of Western history, nobody knew anything about the mating habits or like the gender of an elephant herd. No one could get close enough during a stampede to figure out who was a boy and who was a girl. Until about 200 years ago, in most of Europe, the elephant was a mythical creature, no more real than a unicorn, something that you had heard about in old legends, and a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend had once seen in some improbable journey. Anyway, if we're going to explore the bizarre history of elephant as role model, it will only make sense if we remember that the elephant was only an ideal to people who knew nothing about them. 2,000 years ago, in the century when Jesus and the Caesars roamed the earth, the Roman scientist known as Pliny the Elder wrote, "The elephant has a religious respect for the stars and the sun and the moon." It is said by some authors, he wrote, without naming any authors, that at the first appearance of the new moon, herds climb down from a forest to a river, and they purify themselves in solemn ritual form by sprinkling their bodies with water. After which, having saluted the moon, they return to the woods carrying their young ones who are tired. Now, Pliny reports this rumor that he's heard of the elephant baptism. And he also reported on a time when elephants were brought to Rome. There had been a great curiosity about elephants in Greece and Rome ever since Alexander the Great encountered them in his travels to India. Everybody wanted to see one. So the celebrity general Pompey Magnus imported some elephants to battle in the Roman Colosseum because this was the Roman way of appreciating novelty and diversity. Getting drunk and watching exotic animals and abductees hack each other to death in the Colosseum. So they imported these elephants. There was a lot of, anticipation about seeing them, but when the elephants were caged near the Colosseum, they started crying. They started weeping. And the drunken Roman sports fans were so moved with pity and compassion that they rose up against Pompey, demanding that the animals be released. The Roman lawyer Cicero reported that the mob, he said, was greatly impressed by the elephants but manifested no pleasure. The result was a certain compassion and a kind of feeling that this huge beast has a fellowship with the human race. I'm fascinated by these two moments. The Roman mob identifying elephants as fellow humans, and the belief that of all animals, only elephants practice religion. Medieval Christians seized upon this as evidence that elephants are Christians also. Although this would seem more like some kind of Wiccan lunar goddess ritual, especially when we consider that the adult elephants who were praising the moon together, accompanied by babies, were all female. So it was more like a witchcraft Sabbath than a Sunday morning mass. And then I have to wonder, if elephants did believe in a lunar goddess, would they envision her in human or elephant form? Well, I think the answer must be obvious. Excuse me. But being Christians, the Christians assumed that if elephants are religious, they must be Christian too. The belief in elephant baptism went hand in hand with a belief in elephant burial. Now, the elephant burial ground does seem to be a mythical thing, but elephants in the wild have been observed to pick up some vegetation and lay it over a deceased friend or relative. So elephants do conduct a sort of burial. Now, this is an act that cannot be explained in terms of subsistence or reproductive success. It is not a survival strategy. So I do have to wonder, what is on an elephant's mind? An elephant's mind, I recently learned, weighs 11 pounds. It is 4 times the size and weight of a human brain. Medieval bestiaries, which were popular zoology books with a mix of factual and fantastical animals, claimed that elephants alone remember the location of the Garden of Eden, and they won't reveal it to us because they still sneak off and use it as their secret elephant mating ground. Now we know. Throughout Western civilization, humans seem to feel a special bond with the elephant. Like more than the chimpanzee, more than the orangutan, we seem to feel a connection with the elephant. Like I said, primarily humans who have never encountered one in the wild. Boria Sachs wrote that elephants strike a responsive chord in us because they mirror our sense of alienation from the natural world. This creature is so unique with, its nose that's like a tentacle with a sort of hand at the end of it. Clearly, the existence of this creature is evidence of something playful in the mind of some creator or in the chaos of mutations. Or maybe the elephant was designed by 5 blindfolded beings who are still trying to figure out what it is. I don't know. I woke up this morning and I asked myself, are you really going to get up in front of all these people with all of this stuff going on in the world today and say something stupid about elephants? And then I thought, well, if it wasn't for a guy who looked like me saying something stupid about elephants, I wouldn't even be here. Thank you very much.